I'm back here today with another fabulous state leader. This is Speaker Ryan Fecteau. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Ryan represents Biddeford, and I've had the pleasure of working with Ryan over the last couple legislative sessions, and we've been walking this tightrope of housing together, where I've been representing a lot of the municipal perspective, and Ryan has been representing the state goal of building more housing. And I have to say, Ryan listens, and Ryan is willing to go anywhere, even to talk with people that don't agree with him. And that is a fantastic characteristic that I really admire about Ryan. And he's also really passionate about making sure that we have affordable housing for all people in Maine. So I really appreciate you being here and being willing to be in dialogue with GPCOG and our member municipalities.
Great to be here.
I'm so glad. So we're going to launch right in about how infrastructure is needed in order to support state goals that you've been helping to shape in your role as a legislator and as the Speaker of the House. And LD 2003 and 1829 really represented pretty significant shifts for Maine and how we're expecting to build housing. And it's early days still as it's getting implemented, but what are you starting to see as outcomes from these laws?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think for those of you who are on the ground working on the implementation of these laws, you probably have seen some building happening as a result of the passage of particularly LD 2003. As you know, LD 1829 has not been implemented by any town as far as I know at this point.
Still in rulemaking.
Exactly, and I think there's a bill pending that will make some changes that I suspect will many of you will be engaged on in this legislative session. So LD 2003, I think, is really what we're talking about when we talk about like what are we seeing in terms of results. And I think the result is light touch density, which is really what the bill was designed to do, which is build a little bit more density where otherwise single family homes were the only thing allowed. And I don't think we've seen like metropolises or metropoli of duplexes being built in communities, but I think we probably have seen a few lots that otherwise would have been single family homes now having a duplex on it. And that's really the intention of the law. It was light touch, but it was also, I think it's also the result of the fact that the market preference amongst consumers in the housing market remains single family. I mean, people all have the dream of owning their own home and having their lawn and their picket fence and a backyard. And I think while the law unlocks possibility, at least on paper, I think we're going to continue to see a mix of housing types. And that was the intention of the law. The intention of the law was to unlock various housing types to be possible, not necessarily translate to every single lot that is zoned residentially becomes a quadplex, or every single lot that is zoned for multifamily takes advantage of the density bonus and has a 20-unit building on it. And I think when you all review what's happening in your own communities, you're probably seeing that that is true. The law is not being realized at every single turn and every single opportunity. So I think it's been balanced.
So, it is still early in the implementation of LD 2003, and so there's some of this light touch densities happening. A few ADUs are being built around the region, around the state. What do you expect, like if you could look down 5-10 years, what do you expect will be the outcome of these laws?
I think pretty much what I just described, which is we'll see communities having more housing types that people will either be renting or buying, and
more than single family.
No, I think single family will continue to be the predominant choice in the market for many reasons. It's there's a buyer, like you're guaranteed to have a buyer. I think it's a lot harder to build a duplex and then sell it. There's a certain buyer that wants to own a duplex. There's tons of people who want to own a single family home. So I think it'll just be, I think it will be a very mixed composition of housing. Again, that's what we want to see. We want to see a mix of housing types that allow people to buy a property and build a duplex, live on one side and rent out the other. Buy a property, build a single family home, sell it. Buy a property, build a single family home, live in it. That's really the purpose of the law, and I think that's what we're going to see over the next several years.
So in our municipal panel, we had Westbrook, Wyndham, Scarborough, and Saco. And all of those communities have been experiencing fairly significant amounts of housing growth. And we asked them the question, what's the major barrier that you're facing right now from an infrastructure perspective? And we heard, I'm just filling you in, everybody else knows this, but we heard sewer, we heard traffic congestion, we heard school capacity, and then we also heard internal city capacity to be able to keep up with the permitting process. And we also heard about sewer in particular. One of the challenges is being climate resilient, particularly if the sewer district, the wastewater district, I've actually been told to call it a clean water facility. So where the clean water facility is next to the water, that's another real challenge. So I want to ask you, from the state's perspective, what can the state do to help our municipalities overcome these very expensive infrastructure upgrades that are designed, that would be designed to support high density housing? So we're not talking about just like an ADU on a single family property, but really these larger scale developments that we're seeing in our region.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I want to say first and foremost as a preface is the law we passed, LD 2003, LD 1829, both of those laws have provisions that require verification that there's adequate water and sewer capacity. And that was responsive to a suggested change from Maine Municipal Association and the first version of this law in LD 2003. That is pretty much part and parcel with how development occurs currently. When someone is going before planning board, they need to provide verification that there's adequate water and sewer. Nothing is changing as a result of these laws in regard to that element of development. As it relates to the reality that we have with water and sewer and older infrastructure and the need to replace it and also to expand infrastructure to places that your communities have said, we actually do envision growth happening here in the future, but we don't have water and sewer there. And so for the time being, the growth is going to remain low density because we just can't afford to pay the multi-million dollars that it would take to bring water and sewer out to that part of town. That's a problem, and we want to solve that. And so last year I put forward legislation that would authorize a state bond for $75 million to provide grants to communities. There is a match requirement from towns, so you have to put up some money to get some money, but it would help replace older infrastructure that is not adequate any longer, or extend infrastructure if the extension is going to lead to greater density. So it doesn't allow you to extend it to a place that you just want extended because of an industrial zone or something. It has to be connected to this idea of creating greater density.
So a growth area?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, a growth area as recognized in comprehensive plans.
Yep.
Okay, so this is exciting, $75 million bond. Tell us about where that is in the legislative process and what kind of support you have for it, where you see some bumps and barriers, and what you need from us.
Yeah, well, as many of you here probably know, bonding requires a 2/3 vote in both the House and Senate. Getting bonds passed have been challenging over the last several years, but I have a glimmer of hope because last year or 2 years ago, when I was not in the legislature, but when I was out of the legislature, they passed a bond package that voters voted on in the last election and approved overwhelmingly. And that bond package included a number of things. Unfortunately, no public infrastructure money. But these conversations are happening right now. The Appropriations Committee has all of the bond bills that are far-ranging. They actually heard a new bond bill yesterday on supporting the agricultural sector. So there's a lot of interest, and I think there's interest from both sides of the aisle on finding the right inputs around what a bond package that would go out to the voters for approval might look like. And so maybe it's a little bit of money for ag, maybe it's a little bit of money for public infrastructure, maybe it's a little bit of money for building housing, maybe it's some money for, trying to think of some of the other things that have been asked for, culverts. I heard culverts earlier.
Culverts are important.
So I think that there's a real possibility, but it requires advocacy. And so for those of you in this room, those of you who have connections to other communities and other community leaders, I think now is the time to take the opportunity to write the members of the Appropriations Committee, to write the leaders in the respective caucuses in Augusta, and ask them to support a bond package that includes public infrastructure for public water, public sewer, and culverts.
Culverts, maybe culverts too.
Yeah.
We need culverts.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question about that, because the state, both the legislature and the administration, has really staked a claim in housing being one of the top priorities that we have to address collectively as a state. How well understood do you think it is in Augusta that we really need the infrastructure funding in order to build the housing? Like, it's a necessary thing that has to go if they want to achieve the state goal of 84,000 units.
Yeah, I think it's pretty well understood that the two are interconnected. I mean, I understand it. That's why I put the bond forward to try to build or try to secure funding that can make a real transformative difference. I think, like most things, we kind of nibble around the edges on these things. So a little bit of money, but these issues require big solutions. And I'm I guess growing more impatient with like nibbling around the edges. I want to solve these problems because they're urgent. Housing remains, there's been polling. There's so much polling happening right now because, I don't know, there's like elections happening.
An election year, maybe.
In November. And those polls are great because they also include questions about what issues are on people's minds. And consistently, over and over and over again, the number one issue on the minds of voters, the people we represent, is housing. It just consistently is on the top of people's minds. But we cannot solve the housing crisis if we don't have the infrastructure that supports the development that needs to happen here in our state. And so connecting these two dots is extremely important. And I think lawmakers in Augusta understand that. And now it's about time we step up and put our housing money where our mouth is, and show that we also want to support the infrastructure that makes this housing possible.
I want the state. Well, first of all, I'll just underscore this for all of us, that if we want to be action oriented and solution oriented, then this bond bill could be very helpful to municipalities. And can you name the types of infrastructure that it would support?
Public water, public sewer was my bond package. There's another bond, the bond package I put forward. There's another bond for culverts. I think what will ultimately happen is, so there are probably like 18 bonds that have been put forward, for different things. School construction is another one.
Okay, I just remembered.
So that's another important one. School construction, which we know the revolving construction fund has never had enough money in it, and this would be a one-time infusion of some real capital to help clear some of the wait lists that exist around school construction and renovation. And so, what I anticipate happening is there will be one LD that is used as the vehicle for a bond package that includes a bunch of these elements. And so I don't think your advocacy really needs to be about one bill or a few bills. I think your advocacy should be whatever the final bond package looks like, it should include public infrastructure for water and sewer, culverts, school construction, and whatever else you all care about. I don't want to tell you what to care about.
Well, I was actually going to ask.
I'm trying to influence you a little bit, but.
Well, and you've also sat down with our members multiple times to talk with them about what they need, and I know you're probably in conversation throughout the state. Are there things that you've heard from communities that are really shaping your understanding of what's needed in order to support more housing at the community level?
Yeah, there was a developer in Auburn a few years ago that wanted to take advantage actually of LD 2003. A very similar project portfolio to what Green Mars is doing in Stroudwater here in Portland.
Can you describe that for
that's like they're doing like quadplexes with ADUs that people can either rent out the ADUs or use as additional space. And I forget how many units in total, but it's a pretty sizable development, taking advantage of the law that was passed a few years ago. This developer in Auburn wanted to do something very similar, but because of the lack of public water, public sewer access was restricted to like 20 or 30 single family homes. Mm-hmm. And so ended up building a 20 to 30 unit subdivision rather than build this more dense community village type design that he was hoping to build. So that was one of the early examples that I had heard of public water, public sewer being the lack of it being an impediment to realizing greater density than what would have otherwise been allowed.
So right before you, we had Deputy Commissioner Joyce Taylor here from DOT. And we're talking a lot about water and sewer, which I know many of you care a lot about. And in that conversation, we're talking about transportation. How is the legislature thinking about connecting its housing goals to the transportation investments that the state is making?
Yeah, well, I think she spoke pretty eloquently about how the department has sort of been already tracking those investments being in close proximity to services. And I think we think about a lot of the changes we're making with the housing laws that have passed about being focused around where services exist. We want people to live in close proximity to where the services that they rely upon every day, that they interact with every day, we want people to live close to those things. It's
cheaper for everybody, the state and the property taxpayer.
Yeah, and we also want people to be in close proximity to where they work. Mm-hmm. And we know in Maine, some people travel really long distances to get from where they live to where they work. Some people don't take up job opportunities because the opportunity does not have a housing opportunity that pairs with it. So. And I know, municipalities are also employers, and I represent my hometown of Biddeford. Biddeford has a police force of 54 people. We currently have 11 vacancies on our police force, a 20% vacancy rate amongst our police officers. And the number one thing that our chief of police cites as the impediment for her hiring is housing. And so, when we think about proximity to an employer, I want our police officers in Biddeford to live where they serve. And I want them to be able to live in close proximity to the place that they are going to drive to work to every day, or maybe walk.
Maybe walk, maybe
nice?
bike.
Maybe bike.
Maybe take a bus.
Bike.
Yes.
Sierra are here.
Yeah. Or in Biddeford, take a train.
Or take the train.
There are a lot of options. We are ready for some audience questions. All right, Becca and Lucy, you guys are on.
I like your thought about the infrastructure money because I've been a utility director for decades at this point. But we're going to create more sewer. What are we going to do with the biosolids? That has to be answered. The state has locked us out, as you know, that we can only go to landfill. The landfill capacity is diminishing. And I hear no speak of LD 25, the $50 million bond for PFAS. How are you going to tie these together? And how are we going to solve this problem before we run out of capacity to deal with our biosolid?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you, Howard.
Obviously involves some things that are a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I do know that there was a lot of conversation in this past session, as you probably know, around the landfill and biosolids. There's a need for solid waste at the landfill because of risk of collapse, or I don't know the exact mechanics of how it works. And there's been talks of having a dryer coming online that would allow for the waste to be dried. I don't know where that is.
Have we even thought about adapting that law and just going back to composting and adapting maybe a federal guidelines that have a state more stringent laws?
For the PFAS law? Yeah, I don't know if there's a pending bill to try to repeal the progress we made on that. I think. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Howard. Other questions?
Mr. Speaker, Ed Susslovic, Metro Board President. Thanks for your leadership, just in general, but especially on the housing issue. Two-part question. You know I was going to sneak it in. Number one, do you see any parallels to the affordability housing, the lack of affordable housing crisis here in Maine now, with where we stood on the environment back in 1971? I know you weren't born then. But maybe your grandfather.
It's hard for me to compare, but yeah.
Talk to John Martin, your predecessor. When the state's waterways were threatened with serious pollution, and they recognized that individual action, uncoordinated by cities and towns, some taking action, some not, was not up to the task. And so they direct assault on local control, admittedly, but they passed the shoreline zoning law, and I think it has served the state well. Any parallels to that in terms of, are we there where we need that kind of approach? And then my second one would be, do you see any possibilities in, well, your lifetime, because you have more years left than I do, to Maine ever passing any kind of a local option tax to fund some of these things as opposed to just relying on the property tax?
Did Kristina ask you to ask that question?
I didn't, but, or a regional option tax.
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, you're going to probably get me beat up if I answer the first question. So, but no, I think the issue of housing affordability has clearly risen to a level that is not just a statewide issue; it's a national issue. We're seeing, I was on a call recently with mayors from around New England who were trying to get their arms around how to solve this problem and trying to pull ideas from other jurisdictions and states that have taken action. And I think there's collective recognition that this is a huge problem, and I think for communities, I think for municipalities, you should want to see some statewide action, because in some cases there are some communities, probably in this room, that have taken on a lot of the burden of solving the problem. And I'm not going to call anyone out, but there's some communities that haven't done too much. And the statewide law, I think, spreads some of the share of being part of the solution. And it doesn't mean that one community that is smaller, 2,000 people, is going to build the same amount of housing that Portland's building. That's obviously ridiculous. But it does mean that a community of 2,000 people that hasn't built 20 units in the last 10 years isn't going to be able to continue to be on a path where they're not contributing to solving this problem for their own residents, for their own community members, for the people who come every day to drive the school bus, to work in the local cafe. We should all be part of this solution. So I think the statewide law is important for that reason. I also think what's important about the statewide law is we maintained a number of the components that go into these local decisions and left them to the towns. Setback requirements, height restrictions, lot coverage. None of that has changed. So local communities still have the opportunity to tailor how they want to see development built on a particular lot with those mechanisms. And I think that's an important element of the law we passed. Your second question was related to local or regional. I have been a supporter of that. That comes up every year I'm in the legislature.
But not the regional one.
The regional one is not. I think it's intriguing, the aspect of allowing a group of communities to come together and say, we want to impose a regional tax. I mean, we see it across, have you ever booked lodging and looked at your bill, and you can anywhere else in the country, you can see you probably get hit by the municipality and the county and the state. And in Maine, we just don't allow that to occur. I'm not saying I want both the municipality and the county to add an additional tax onto things, but I think it's very clear that this over-reliance on property taxes alone for municipalities to be innovative and solution-oriented is not sustainable, especially in our state. I think our particular circumstances with demographics that we're the oldest state in the nation, and continuing to rely on property taxes as our population continues to age, and we're hitting the people who can least afford to pay these ever-increasing property taxes is not a sustainable solution for how we do business. And so I will continue to support that proposal, and I'll support a new version of it too if it comes forward.
Trying to find a common ground between urban and rural communities by doing it regionally.
And that has been the challenge, is it's become the issue of local option sales tax. I'm sure Mr. Pelletier, who has come to Saco from a Rustic, and would agree with this. This issue has historically been a rural versus urban. It's been like a pseudo rural versus urban fight in Augusta.
Yeah.
And so I think finding a way to not just make it service center, not for it to not just be a benefit to the service center.
Exactly. Yeah, and to have some sharing that happens between service centers and more rural towns, so we all can benefit from infrastructure that helps the whole region. Yeah. So we have time for one last question, and I saw your hand, sir, first.
Tony Armstrong. I endorse Ed's question on local option. I think I'd throw in some kind of a sales tax on short-term rentals as a possible source. But my question also is related to the real estate transfer tax, and we know that was increased last year. Has anybody done any calculations yet on what that might be generating for us in the course of a typical year? Last year was not typical because we're selling so many high-end houses, but it may continue to be that way. Has anybody run those numbers yet?
Yeah, so we are expecting in the first year to generate $17 million from the increase in the real estate transfer tax. And of course, we expect that to continue to go up. It also generates more money for county government because the counties take a portion of the real estate transfer tax off the top, and then the rest is transmitted to the state. So we expect county governments to get some more as a result, but the portion that's going in, so I should say that's the 17 million is only speaking to the portion that's going into the new housing production fund. But the overall number is over $100 million.
Oh, wow. Great.
Yeah.
I love seeing that Sotheby's Legacy brochure that comes out and seeing those $2 or $3 million houses. You know, it looks like that could be very helpful. So.
I know there were a lot of realtors very busy before November 1st when the new real estate transfer tax was coming into online. I'm sure they closed a lot of deals.
Yes. Deal making.
Better close it now before you have to pay more.
Speaker, absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you for your continuing willingness to dialogue with our municipalities and for you leading on so many issues at the state level.
Thank you. Yeah,
let's have a round of applause for Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good to see you too.
All right.